Okay, welcome back, guys. We have Joe Evans. He is in Idaho as our Green Party representative. Angela, she is our Libertarian in California. Matt Lee is our Center Republican in the great state of Texas. And Tho Bishop is our Republican in Florida. We had an opportunity to view a viral video from Dr. Z. Dr. Z is a YouTube doctor right now. His video will be linked in the description below. We are going to react to that today. And basically, the onset of this video was Iceland. Iceland is a very small country. They have an opportunity to do contact tracing. They tested half of their population. And Joe, based on Dr. Z's findings, tell me what you saw in that video.
Most of it comes across with a lot of the same information that I've come, we've all come to conclusions about the process that's going on with COVID right now. But he nails it. We've mishandled it here in the United States from the get-go. We've been approaching the wrong issues. We've been looking for the wrong symptoms. Mandates haven't been working because the mandates are based on bad information. So we need to circle back around and take a look at what they found, actually get that information out to the people here in the United States so that the people can make an informed decision with what's going on with regards to their lives. Now, here in my state, we're dealing with a lot of our businesses have adopted individual mask mandates due to a lack of organization from up higher. Our governor hasn't issued a mask mandate. Most of our mayors haven't either, but the businesses are starting to take a look after the health and welfare of their employees. So we're seeing more and more mask mandates in order to enter businesses. And enforcement along those lines, we still get resistance from certain groups here in the state, but people are starting to pay attention and they're being more proactive with their own self-care, being less dependent on what's going on with regards to CDC or World Health Organization, because let's face it, they've lost our trust.
Sure. So, Tho, to Joe's point, he's up in Idaho and you are in Florida. Dr. Z, I've got my notes here. He goes into detail about how they are finding an actual fatality rate of 0.3%. Now, compare that, as he did in the video, to the flu fatality rate, which is 0.1%. I mean, that's 3 times higher. Is that alarming?
Coming from the free state of Florida, where I think Governor DeSantis has been one of the great leaders on this issue, because, I mean, again, yes. Okay. I don't think that there was a lot of COVID is, as you would expect for a novel virus, right, is more dangerous than the flu based on these findings. I think more importantly than necessarily the specific issues of COVID itself, though, I think there's something to be said about the structural advantages that Iceland has had. My wife and I were actually supposed to go there this year, so I'm disappointed on that. But what benefits Iceland is several things. For one, it's a much smaller government body, right? I mean, it's a much smaller population. Smaller populations are easier to make good governing decisions. This is why political decentralization in federalism is a good thing, right? More importantly, though, it's a question of the larger issue of the consolidation of science, right? I mean, the CDC has been wrong from the beginning. That's not a surprise. In fact, one of the most important things that the Trump administration doesn't get proper credit for, if you're looking at differences on how like Biden would have handled this, one of the first things they tried to do was to eliminate the CDC's approval of having a monopoly on testing and treatment, because the more you have consolidated science, it's not just the U.S. that's had issues dealing with it. It's the rest of the world, because we keep believing these bureaucratic failed institutions of science that are more interested in protecting China in the case of WHO or the UN than they are in actually finding the science itself. So again, the fact that Iceland was able to utilize its size to do their own studies instead of going along with the established narrative is why they were able to find these findings in the first place. And more importantly, as Dr. Z mentioned, in terms of how you use this, there's not a prescription, right? The science says this, so therefore the policy platform is this. No, I mean, what Iceland was able to do was mass testing, because the issue of spreading the virus without people having symptoms. So that requires a much more infringement upon liberty and life routine than most Americans, I think, want. And we're seeing this with the constant willingness to ignore it. So chances are you're going to have some societies that would rather take the risk of going out there and living life than they would on having to do regimented testing every single day in the name of contact tracing.
So Angela, to Tho's point, and kind of piggybacking off of Joe right there, you're in California, you're a libertarian. I have no party affiliation. I want the answers. I want the truth. I want us to get through all of the political sides, and I want to see every angle for myself to make my own decision. Dr. Z in his video goes through the process of how Iceland used a national registry, a repository of all medical information. Is that something that we need here in the United States?
Absolutely not. I don't want my medical records in the hands of the government. That doesn't make any sense to me. They have the other thing that Dr. Z talked about was whether or not this was a values issue. And I think that it is. I think that Tho makes some good points that Americans value individualism. I definitely don't want to be handing over more data to the centralized government than I need to be for so many reasons.
Sure. Matt, you are a center Republican in Texas. You were shaking your head yes to that question. Can you explain?
It's really important that we understand that unless we have a population-wide genomic database, there was no way to even compare ourselves or how it was handled over the past 9 months to what they did in Iceland.
Iceland is a lot smaller than the United States. It looks like we're going to have another spending bill coming up soon. All of this spending that we're doing, is the Green Party in line with the spending that the United States is doing?
This starts getting a little bit more complicated on the issues. The reason why is because the Green Party's focus is on decentralization. You want to be able to give the individual powers to the region so that they can control what's going on in their specific ecosystems, whether it's environmental, whether it's financial, what it is. So the fact that the federal government has so much control over the power, over the banking across the entirety of the United States, which runs into the libertarian problem of blanket policies that just don't work in certain regions of the United States. So with going for the decentralization, we don't want the federal government deciding how that money gets spent. We want to be able to give that control down to the local agencies, local organizations, and make sure our local health departments have the best information available to make the decisions, put the money where it's going to do the most good in those local communities.
Sure. So Tho, with allocating funds more in a local area versus centralized throughout the United States, is what Joe is talking about. But Dr. Z is talking about a value and a culture idea that Angela brought up. How do those values and cultures align with the pandemic? I mean, we're in a state of emergency right now.
We are, but what needs to be understood though is that for the most part, I mean, for example, the economic crisis, it is as much a product of government mismanagement, particularly in blue states, right? I mean, what we have right now is we have blue states full of hypocritical tyrants imposing these lockdowns and then not following them. You have a massive public trust issue, which is a major problem with governance in general and feeds into a lot of the other tides that are going on right there. When you have governments that can't be relied upon and the people are questioning the wisdom there, it hurts policy making decisions. But more importantly, though, again, the real crisis is government response to the virus more than it is the virus itself. Because again, even with a 0.3 mortality rate, again, the people that are the most susceptible to the virus are people with pre-existing health issues, things like that. What we really should be talking about is, why aren't American behaviors lend themselves to strong, better lifestyles in general? We should be looking at an individual empowerment sort of perspective on all these issues, rather than, again, trying to expect the federal government to come in and wave a magic wand and save the day. And again, what we're seeing right now is the biggest issue in terms of the way that your livelihood has been affected by this virus is what's your state government looking like, more than malfunctions at the federal level. So again, if you were in a blue state, you're going to be in a much worse situation on average than, again, a state like Florida, which has, again, I think the best Republican leader out there.
So Angela, to Tho's point, if you look at a state-by-state basis, right now, you're in California, you are in maybe the most blue state of us all, in maybe one of the most blue counties, LA County. They have very heavy restrictions right now on mask mandates. They have very heavy restrictions right now on curfews. And we're looking at cases spike regardless of these curfews and mask mandates. Are they working?
No, and you know where else has experienced a third wave spike? Iceland, because that was something else that Dr. Z talked about in his video. These restrictions don't work because it looks like there are spikes happening, a third wave, as they're calling it, all over the world, regardless of what kind of mandates and issues that they enforced regarding, trying to stop this thing.
Sure. And
Another thing
Matt,
that
to Angela's point, though, I mean, we're looking at the symptoms that he's bringing up. So Dr. Z tells us that science has found that the true symptoms are muscle ache, headache, dry cough. Why are they taking our temperatures everywhere?
Yeah, that's a great question and a really good point. And a lot of what he said was very factual. A lot of what he said is actually proven in the Epidemiology Society. I reached out to a few friends and they were able to confirm a lot of what he said. I think it is a way for us to say that we're doing the right thing and say that we're thinking about things correctly when really we don't have any idea. And I think that is truly a product, straight confusion at the highest levels. We can talk about what capabilities are of red states and blue states, but at the end of the day, when you have a president and when you have a Center for Disease Control that constant and a spokesperson in Dr. Fauci, they're constantly saying something different and constantly coming on TV and saying this is what it is. A president that said he was over it in 3 days and is now immune forever. These things are confusing the American public and they are confusing these local governments. These state governments are not equipped to do what they need to do without factual, real information. And until we're able to give them that, then it doesn't matter if it's a Democrat state or if it's a Republican state. We're going to see spikes, we're going to see issues, and it's going to continue to be a mess in the United States. We're too big to have all of this craziness at the top levels, all of this misinformation at the top levels to make any good impact. Iceland has, 359,000 people in the entire country. Of course, they're going to follow the rules. Of course, they're going to do everything that they were asked to do. And yeah, I'm sure they have a spike, but they also have a lot of things going for them as well. They are a very homogeneous society from a genetic standpoint. They have island borders. They have a lot of things going for them that we don't have.
You're right. He does make a really good point there, Matt. Joe, your final thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, so the point with the third wave in Iceland was because they had to open up tourism. That created the third wave, the third spike. Reason why is because everybody started coming in from countries that hadn't gained control of the situation. So in order to reopen the economy, they had to deal with a spike. But as Matthew already pointed out, Iceland's been able to control the situation. The number of people that come in, they're able to test them, they're able to evaluate them, they're able to determine exactly what the vectors for disease were, who brought it into country, where the outbreak, and they were able to isolate it. So even though they're having a third spike, like Angela mentioned, Matthew's on top of it saying, yeah, but they got it. As soon as it's entered in country, as soon as that day 5 test comes through with a positive or negative, they know where the spike is. They're able to treat it. They're able to address the situation. And the
so you're a Republican in Florida. What are your final thoughts on this topic?
Look, I think the idea that, the problem is that we haven't had a common narrative from the top. And the problem is that's just not the way that the scientific process really works, right? You're going to have differing opinions. You're going to have the most dangerous thing that we could possibly have is a one-size-fits-all narrative for the country, because again, we've seen that the institution, Dr. Fauci has been wrong on this issue, and yet he's been held up by every major institution as an expert. No, he's been hypocritical himself. He has been contradicting himself. Thank God we actually had Trump bring in people like Scott Atlas. We've had Ron DeSantis bring in his group. We've had the Great Barrington Declaration up in New England questioning the narrative, because policy, which is really what this comes down to, as much as a science, when we talk about the relationship between government and science, we're talking about policy prescriptions. Science doesn't deliver it. You need to have experimentations. You need to have different approach, because again, every state's different. Florida, again, the fact that Florida has outperformed significantly most of the large population blue states, in spite of the fact that we're heaven's waiting room down in South Florida with all the retirees, is a testament to the Ron DeSantis approach working here in a way that again, much rather be here than California, New Jersey, or New York.
Angela, you're in California as a libertarian. What are your final thoughts on this topic?
I think that Dr. Z's video on Iceland was pretty informative, but again, it glosses over a lot of things that have been glossed over in the United States and other countries. Is how do they qualify mortalities? There are different deaths from COVID-19. We could talk about just straight up death from respiratory syndrome. that would be just straight up, you died from coronavirus. COVID was a contributing cause, but the primary disease was something like diabetes or renal failure. And then we've got, outlandish things that occasionally get reported, like a patient dies from a trauma, but it also gets reported as COVID-19 because they had a positive test. And the other thing that they talk about in Iceland, and this has definitely been an issue here, is you can test negative and then a couple days later test positive. Are we assuming that we need to be double testing like Dr. Z says to catch it? Or is it possible that the testing isn't as effective as we think it is? And because PCR levels in viral testing are not really looking for the right thing, or they're looking for things that are just way above, like a viral load. It doesn't show exactly when you got, it doesn't show if you're contagious. It doesn't show if your body fought it off. It doesn't show if you're shedding the virus. And I think that these are really important things to consider if we're going to build policy around it, whatever country you're in.